Those are performers from the Children's House in Uummannaq. In Greenland, we will hear more from them later, but thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. We have come from many places, from Uummannaq and from even further north in Greenland, to be here with you today, from Wyoming, from North Carolina, from Hawaii. We have planned for years, for months to be here. None of us could have planned to be here after such a terrible event has happened in Paris, and we cannot begin this event without acknowledging the loss of so many of your fellow citizens here in Paris just a few weeks ago. Could we begin with just a moment of silence for the victims of the Bataclan and the other areas on the 13th of November? Thank you. We're going to present a project to you in many forms this evening that had its origins at a meeting in Florida earlier this year, last spring. And I'm going to introduce two people who will be participating this evening, the writer, Gretel Erlich, and the artist and filmmaker, Mel Chin, who are going to describe how this project got started and how it is progressing through thick and thin. Mel, Gretel, come on up. There you go.
Well, how's it going, Gretel?
Well, so we were at the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation on Captiva Island in Florida, and we had this kind of crazy idea to come to Paris with a Greenland dog sled, because I've traveled in Greenland for 23 years. And Mel had the idea of having
About, maybe at least 10 to 7 French standard bred poodles pull it.
so a little of both worlds.
But it starts because, not because of just ideas that float in, but sometimes it's a compelling article by Gretel that really, really profoundly affected my thinking. Thinking that I knew most everything necessary about climate change and all the problems. Her article, Rotten Ice, in Harper's, really got me thinking about a place I knew not enough about. And so this project was compelled into being by knowledge. So I got somebody to blame, see?
Yeah, right. So Mel had the idea of making a film, this dog sled, this gathering of two worlds, that to remind everybody that climate change it happens everywhere. What happens in the Arctic happens to all of us, because the Arctic drives the climate of the world.
You know, and beyond that, it was almost like a situation, though it could drive it, it's almost like, where is it really happening? It's happening at home, and where the centers of change, and how to get that brought forward. It is a message that is quite tragic in my understanding, in my reading, and then to see the bravery of the people that have come from there, that talk about adaptation and connection as a key way of survival. And I think that's probably more about what this project is about. It's almost like how the Arctic is not just some place called Quinac in Greenland. It's in, Egypt Township, North Carolina. And how can we do that? How can you create art as a catalytic structure to bring you into that realization?
Yeah, so I think the idea was, we can hear disquisitions about climate and we can read the facts, but at some point, I think we all need a little point of light to go towards, of imagination, the human imagination, that helps us see in a wider way who we are on the planet and who we are culturally, that cultural diversity is linked intimately with biological diversity, and that all of our lives, our cultures, and our actual lives of all sentient beings are in danger at this point.
Yeah, you know, in science, you hear there's a lot of science, a lot of data out there, and there's these terms like a catalyst. You know, a catalyst creates this chemical reaction. We learned it in our early years in chemistry. I almost learned it. I think I passed it. But if we could take that and talk about art and ideas of art as catalytic structures that don't necessarily bring you all the way there, but it sets up the platform for understanding of new languages and new concepts and new directions that you have never been conceived, and give an opportunity for those voices that are driven by that to live.
Let's see some film.
Oh my goodness, okay, well, all right, well maybe we should start then, all right? Okay. Well, it started in the water in Captiva, Florida. And so this is the artist, Natalie Jeremienko. Oh, is it up? No. Oh, there it is. It started in the waters of the Atlantic and at a Rising Waters conference where I did meet Gretel and a bunch of other artists and scientists. And we were discussing the dynamics of what rising water would do to Florida. By extension, the rest of the world. Here are some words in the native Thule dialect, and it's this is what moves the project, to hear words or thoughts like this. To think about a culture thousands of years old, not being able to read the signs they've read for so long. And so this is something that really is behind everything we're doing. So then, when you're compelled, you create a script, right? And the script is called Les Articles à Paris. Did I say that right?
No.
Okay, close enough. Okay. And so you do your draft, and you come up with a concept of a dream of a film that can bring this message forward. And you have to make your poster, right? You have to make the poster, and you say, okay, we got it. This is going to get people motivated. And why poodles and why sled? It's almost like, what can you do to bring more power, or not necessarily more power to the words, but bring attention to words that must be heard. So you use devices like standard bred poodles, right, in Paris, running through landmarks. It's a very simple concept. And you have to create swag if you're going to do a movie. You have to do the crew swag, right? That's what people do. You create, this great map that actually centers Greenland at the top of the idea. You create other opportunities to recruit animals to be part of your message, and you have to do it in bilingual form so we all understand what it might be about. So you keep creating to drive this message in some form. And then you map out the route through the streets of Paris. Okay, this is where we're going to run. It's got to make sense. And where's the light and all that? That must be calculated before you even begin. And then you just casting call. Then you have to find the right poodles with the right temperament, the right attitude, the right strength of purpose. I don't know if they understood the script, but you have to start somewhere and get the headshot and make sure they look glamorous enough and the grooming is correct. There's a lot of effort. But it's also to say, why are we doing it? We're also doing it to drive another project. Like the whole message, after a message that's so powerful is brought forward, how can it be delivered beyond a conference here in Paris? So now we're starting on another part of it, the other side, the arcticis.org, where you could put in your city, where it is Egypt Township, or it is Dallas, or it is New York, or it is Paris, and see how the changes in climate are affecting you to bring a relationship and another kind of, have a different kind of association. Maybe that can change my behavior in North Carolina to the degree that I may be more forceful in my relationship to what's happening. And then you got to train night and day. This is night and day. You have to start getting looping and Lady and Hilton and Axel together. And you have to do it at night after the sun is set, and you have to you never whip them, by the way. You just encourage them with pieces of hot dog. But there they go, they start. And if you're lucky, and you don't put too much effort on them, they will pull. Do not pay attention to the ballast. This is outtakes. This is just something that had to counterweight the sled with appropriate mass. So it goes, and so the night time it happens, and then finally, if you're lucky, by daytime, by the time you're ready, they will be ready. And they'll look like this. So we're preparing and getting test footage and beginning to bring the dogs to Paris. So by morning of the 13th, we scan the morning skies. We're at the top where we can see this incredible landscape that is your city. It's a great city. And preparing this message that is to the world that will be delivered from here. But then something happens that evening. We'd spent all night, we'd spent all day, and then we spent all night preparing for the shoot the following day. And then November 13th begins our first word about 11 o'clock, where we're finishing the final production notes that what has happened. What is to be done? We feel that we don't really know. We can't, it's difficult to absorb when you're in the thick of a creative process what you can do, but you're certain that you must do. And then we begin in the morning. This is footage that my co-director, Tim Sternberg, just put out of his window as we went to the early morning shoot. Everything was uncertain, and our purpose was still there to create, but it was held over by an atmosphere of urgency and pain and depression. It was an atmosphere of not only the blast in the air and the blood that must have been spilled. It was the atmosphere of the sirens and an endless night that had preceded us. So this is just scanning streets to get our bearings, because we had to start. And we proceeded to, because that is what we know to do. And the production, we heard from the producers that all outside production had to cease. There was a state of emergency. The dogs had to be sent home. The sled had to be put away. And none of this could happen. But we decided to continue and start with some of the first scenes. And it would set it in Paris to set the place correctly. Sometimes these projects are the time that you need to meditate about what you are and your place in the world. And this is what this, to me, represents. We're moving through the world, and it's very uncertain. Night was the morning. It was maybe 6 in the morning, all right? It was 7 in the morning. I don't know, I can't remember. But it was a night without sleep. And then we begin in the morning light, I believe. We start. This is the second scene. And a woman, she's reading the paper. And a dog might hear something. It's Parisian, I think. She moves out to the balcony. And she strains to hear what the dog can't hear. what is out there? But nothing is there that she can perceive. After we shot that, we were not able to go out to these locations, and so with the bravery and the impulse of we must do something, I think it was Corinne Weber, Philip Duguay, Tim Sternberg, my brilliant cinematographer, Ben Primo. We hopped in a van. We had the van, and we went out. We went out to the places. So the image that was shot here was done as an act of resistance against the idea that something so horrible could end our creativity. To frame a shot of meaning, to show solidarity with the people of France, and we went site to site. And it was totally a necessary act that had to be done. And you know, there's Jens Danielson and Mamaret Christensen that were in full dress Inuit garb with their 12-foot harpoon and their PV stick, their tuk, and they were ready to go. But they also were about their solidarity with the people of France. And that really motivated us to move forward that day, while everything remained uncertain. So we begin to shoot, regardless of permit or not, and sometimes you will wait to do it. So now it's an Inuit who's come all this distance from Quanah, and there are no dogs, and he must move through the streets of Paris. And he takes it far. And he's driven and motivated by something that we need to know. And you can imagine his message reverberating as he pulls this sled through the streets. He is alone, but with his strength, he is able to continue because there is purpose. And then there is the moments for just human connection with the material world or the environmental world, where he looks into the river that surely is part of all the meltwaters that are coming through. And he crosses bridges. And people observe something must be going down. Even the poodle is upset. And there are some that can absorb in our world what a sadness is happening to our world and be empathetic to that. So what we're talking about during all this process, we're also decided that we would start a documentary called The Atmosphere of Emergency, because it's not enough just to make this film. It's never enough just to make a film, maybe. There's always the next film, true. But The Atmosphere of Emergency will be a documentary. And our team has decided to proceed in this investigation of the connections between terrorism and climate change, but in a radicalized way. Because it's something that we as people, as artists, also have yet to fully apprehend and grasp. So this investigation has already started. So what happened was on that night is it crushed many dreams. It destroyed lives. And it reminded us of the world we live in. And it wasn't just Paris, it's in Beirut, happening the day before and the day after. And it's international kind of reality. So dreams are crushed on a daily basis. So the script was totally rewritten because we realized that as dreams are crushed, new dreams must be made. And this, I'll just show this footage that has been cut in, which is the dream sequence that we had to do. Thank you.
Mel Chin. The featured performer in that film, Jens Danielsen, is with us this evening. Also with us is Mamrat Christensen, his partner, his cousin. We'll bring them on a little later in the program, but I wanted to explain that these gentlemen are the elite hunters of Northwest Greenland. They are great men in their society, and we are honored that they have taken the time to come and be with us here in Paris to talk about their life and their experiences and how it has changed as the sea ice has dwindled over these past several years, and as their way of life that they have kept intact for thousands of years is literally melting away before their eyes, and they see a future for their children and their grandchildren far different from the one that they grew up in. And we'd like to encourage you, if you have any questions for them as the evening progresses, think about it, raise your hands when the time comes, and we'll try to answer them for you. In the meantime, it was Mel that was talking about the confluence of terrorism and climate change that we've seen here in Paris these past few weeks, not just the events on the 13th, the events in Saint-Denis a few days later, the events in San Bernardino, the event in London last night. All of this continues to go on as the climate conference continues, and we shall see what agreement, if any, they can reach at the Le Projet over the days of the next week. But these two events are not distinct. These are not two different things, and I'd like to bring up a gentleman who can address that a little more. Well, he's got some credentials that I don't have, a Nobel Prize for one. Barry Moore is an internationally recognized earth scientist. He's the founding director of Climate Central, holds several positions at the University of Oklahoma in the United States, including director of the National Weather Center, and he's a coordinating lead author of the IPCC report, which received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. You may also recognize him as one of the extras in the film. Barry Moore, can you come up, please? Was that your first role in cinema?
Yes, and perhaps my last, unless I can get Mel to take it out.
It's a rough cut, yes.
Yes.
You'll find yourself on the editing room floor before very long.
I know the feeling.
At first blush, tell us about what is the link between climate change and terrorism?
Well, I think that we know that people that will suffer the most from climate change, people that are on the margin already. And so you take a nation like Syria and farmers in Syria, which are always struggling to make a living. And now you begin to change the patterns of rainfall. And so they will cease to be able to make a living.
Many of those farmers in the past 10 years moved from rural areas in Syria into the cities, to Idlib, to Aleppo, to Damascus.
And this kind of thing then is not going to go away. We are facing something that is an ongoing change, and the change will become greater And I think that we know that there's even if we could magically wave a wand and stabilize carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today, we've already been tossing pebbles into the climate pond, and so the ripples are already existing.
I spend my time working for the Hawaii Public Radio doing something called the Pacific News Minute, and I know that many of the representatives of Pacific nations, for example, Kiribati or the Marshall Islands or Tuvalu, say that whatever agreement is reached here in Paris, it's too late for them. Sea level rise will swallow their country's entire before this century is out. Do you think sea level rise, as it impacts nations not just like the Marshall Islands or Tuvalu, which are very small, or Kiribati, which is bigger, but the low-lying areas of Bangladesh or of Southeast Asia or of China, the United States, everywhere, is that going to be the most dramatic change, do you think?
I think in some ways it's the most dramatic in that you have such a great concentration of the population on the coast. And you're already seeing not just the low-lying nations in the Pacific, but we now already have inconvenient flooding in Miami. So when something is inconvenient, it becomes more threatening, particularly when there's so much wealth concentrated on the coast, that this is going to be a very big problem. But I think actually the bigger problem is changes in precipitation globally. We have developed our agricultural systems, the monsoon-based agriculture of China
And India.
and India is geared to the climate of the past. That no longer is the climate of the future.
Glad they've settled that problem in California.
Yes, yes. Well, so now you have this very severe drought in California, which is the first time we've seen a severe drought and temperature increase. Quite often we actually saw drought in California, but without the temperature increase. And now you combine the two. This is very much the pattern of the future.
And it's one thing to do it in California. It's another thing for the tribesmen who live in the highlands of New Guinea or in the Solomon Islands to deal with drought and their kitchen farms on which they depend for sweet potatoes, on which they depend for food. These are failing, and those people are now flooding into the coastal cities as well.
Also, I was thinking about what's happening in the Arctic. And we know from human society for 200 to 300 to 400 years, there was a search for the Northwest Passage. How could you sail from the North Atlantic to the North Pacific? And that search actually ended on September of 2007 with the European satellite beginning to make measurements of a sea ice. And we saw that there were actually 2 passages from the Arctic, from the North Atlantic to the Pacific, beginning in September of 2007. And that now passage is much larger. We're seeing the changes that they're seeing in the Arctic sea ice and in the land ice of Greenland. We know that we're losing ice on Greenland for sure. There is no scientific question about that.
And probably Antarctica as well.
That is a harder problem because Antarctica is a very different place than the Arctic. The Arctic is an ocean, so you have sea ice, and the Arctic has Greenland, which is not as well buffered as Antarctica. I mean, the Gulf Stream goes nearby.
Barry and Moore, thank you again for being kind enough to talk with us.
Mel.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Moore was talking about Greenland, and I want to focus there again and bring Gretel Erlich back up to talk about the changes she's seen in Greenland since she's been visiting there for the past almost quarter century, visiting the northernmost villages in the world and traveling with Jens and Mamoret and some of the others. She's made some films as well, which she'd like to show you. I have to say, she was kind enough to bring me up to as far as Ilulissat, and one thing you don't recognize until you see Greenland, no matter how much you've read about it, is how life there clings to the coast and is oriented to the sea. All of the ice that is a threat is the ice sheet that's on the land of Greenland, but that's not where these gentlemen and their livelihoods are made. They work and live, they don't live on, but they work on the sea ice, which freezes or doesn't, as the case may be. But Gretel, you can tell us more about it.
I think it's interesting that Barian mentioned the Northwest Passage because that's what we call it, but it actually was the traditional route of Inuit people when they began migrating 20,000 years ago from the northeast coast of what we call Siberia, Chukotka, all the way across to Alaska, all the way through the Canadian archipelago, which is now called Nunavut, and finally 4,000 or 5,000 years ago to Greenland. Some of them went across over the top to East Greenland, and the others went down the northwest coast. So what Jens and Memrit, who have been kind enough to let me travel with them for almost 20 years, represent a continuum of culture and language and stories, legends. The same legend that's told in Kanak is told in Point Hope, Alaska, different dialects, but basically it's the same culture. There's nothing else like it in the world that spans something like 6,000 miles. So they represent an extraordinary piece of the world that has been a continuous culture for 20,000 years, and now it's being lost because of climate change. So we're losing lifeways and languages, and also these are the people who are going to have the abilities to teach us how to live in a very uncertain world. When I first came to Greenland in 1993, I went to Uummannaq, where the wonderful children are from, and the sea ice was routinely 10 feet thick, 6 feet, 10 feet thick. When I was there in 2007, which was a very, very hot year, it was 7 inches thick. In 2004, I had a grant from National Geographic to go out on a month-long walrus trip with Jens and Memrit and the others in their extended family. We had 58 dogs, 8 people, and we got 1 walrus the 3rd day that Memrit got. By the time we finished the trip, we had no meat to take home to the families, so it's a food-sharing society. We spent most of the time just trying to find ice that was good enough to get back to Kanak. So from the early 1990s to the mid-2000s, a change that was unimaginable. So I'm going to show a little film from that trip. It's very, very short. That we were just making an ethnographic record, so it's not beautiful like Mel's film, but it kind of gives you an idea of what it's like. The dog sleds are about twice as big as this. They're pulled in a fan-shaped hitch by 15 to 20 dogs, 12 to 20 dogs, depending on the conditions. And when they go out hunting, they go out for a month at a time, or two. They go until they get enough food to bring home to feed their extended families and whoever in the village, widows, sick people, hunters who have hurt themselves. So everybody is always fed. So can we see the trailer? Trailer.
When we go for the British sea hunting, we always keep an eye on how the ice is shaped on the sea ice we're driving, and we can always tell a breathing hole from a normal little bomb because the breathing hole shines.
And we were wondering why they walk in a straight line.
They go one by one and follow exactly the same footprints as the other one, because to step on new ice and new snow makes lots of noise. To step on the man in front of you, his footsteps makes less noise.
We were thinking
Ask them what they've learned about hunting from a polar bear.
It's admirable for us to see a polar bear hunt, or even its abilities. It has no weapons. It is a weapon itself, and it can move on water and on ice just equally. It hunts anything it can hunt. Anything we also hunt. Itself it's worth admiring. We have a traditional unwritten law saying how to cut the animal when we have caught. Yesterday we were 4 persons, so the whole animal was shared in 4 portions. So the man that harpooned the animal is the one that has the first right, and he gets the left part of the body from top to the bottom, and that's his part. That's the best part. First priority are our dogs. The dogs get the good meat.
We need to understand is how much the ice has changed.
For the couple of years, it has been already very bad for the hunters in terms of so few days they have had the chance of bringing time on ice than normal.
Getting food.
Yes, getting food. And the first noticeable change was the storms and the high waves that they never had. And all they did was just wondering, where did that come from? Why is that? And then, and after that, the ice came. Late this year, the ice came set by December. That's as late as they ever know.
How does the changing ice change their culture?
If people are noticing that the hunting season is shortened, the interest for being a hunter might be affected, in the sense that people maybe rather choose another profession than being hunters. And if that continues so, women would not have to sew that much anymore for their husband's clothes. So if ice would disappear, the hunting traditions would also disappear. And we would not make these clothes, wonderful garments we are wearing when we go hunting. I asked him, is there something you would like to share with us before we end? He says, nothing really. Every morning he wakes up, he walks to the window, check out the weather, and imagining how the hunting grounds would be. My body can't do anything anymore, but my mind is always out in the hunting fields.
That little bit of film was, I think, narrated by Aleka Hammond, who was the first female prime minister of Greenland, an old friend of mine. But we would like to present Jens Danielsen and Mamrit Christensen, and they're going to come up and talk to us about what it's like living as subsistence hunters in Greenland now with very uncertain ice. And
They will will be assisted by Tom Osterman, who is going to translate for us. And might I begin by asking, in the statement which we read in Mel's film, and it was interesting to see the reference in Gretel's film as well, to waking up in the morning and looking at the weather to see what was going to happen. And in the statement, it was said, we can no longer read the signs. Can you explain a little bit about what that means?
Mani Sonderpo, Piedalou. Ah, il a. Te manikut, il est au Tahamau, Pignard, le Tadéadran, Nuisset, Ikuiut, Hidakano in Nika, Nadawatang in the Chiu, Heona mi Pignartu, Hiuriminiking on Sayamiku, Tamana, Abdangin Nomin, Hida Watang. Idi he maka te liberatu porangu tu pinyartu ko te poraga o te tana hana kuhina kongi kipu hida he tam.
I can tell that in our upbringing as hunters, then our ancestors, they learn us how to read the sky and the clouds. That's are the one who tell us which weather to wait, and therefore we, under our upbringing, had it in us that we go out and look up the sky, and we can see how or predict how the weather is to come.
Ukiuni di kingu dan atuketsin tamaka hida he tamno adango khama ada atukhna na luchi ano te sengai naka tekku sagatter hamamata akortu luchi.
And in these years, we can't use the knowledge that we have reading the sky because of the changes. All of a sudden, storms, they come without any signs. And that's our, how do you say it, that's how we know it today. Iwi ki tungo mi taku hina tāra anō taku hamara hōlu. Taku si tatara tātu kari. Te maru tammarusi. Of course, we can read when storm clouds, it appears all of a sudden without warning. And we can see it sometimes in a short period of time that they come without any warning. Umi bia chini ano makdo kortu no kau awan nami tai hakteraput ki hero pa niyak stakua ano wano ko kurigen hani achiu adani at hamangai na ha pawangai na ha da kortu duchi takku kai khka. And the usual winds that we know of is the northern wind, strong wind, storms, and also strong wind from south. But of course, we have all the other storms as well. But those two are the most common storms.
And if you cannot rely on them, if you cannot predict them, how does that change your planning to go hunting? How does that change your lives? Takku ka ano takku sa talon hiu pinya seduni akhiwa yung naguhiu khqa ya taru hiku anniki takka khumman ano takku imau wa khitsqa khumsu kang dui pangongi ki mi ko wattado dus kang ke mukhta khama put unga hiu no hui no du dumikko atkhna na khama ugaruto inango dus. Of course, the weather is, we are predicted by the weather, and when the storm comes, it's very hard to plan or even go out hunting. Also because of the changes of ice, that just outside the fjords is, and inside the fjords is only ice. The tracks we used to do is no longer there, so we can't go far out as we used to do. Gretel?
Could you describe what the ice is like now?
Te manikut pinieru tanne tahani chiu atta auri hammam hammiaqatsa taqamritta auri ha samara te hiku putu yaqto adda taqamrit putu miiter hinno du issutuera taqamam udduinnak du putune ayonnak uddu tamakkirge du putuniartaraqa tammatuurutainnarmit tummeqqidduta sahal sikkut ingertatilernerat.
In the beginning of the 90s, when we go out hunting, it happens that we also sometimes fish in the sea ice. Then we have to use a tuk and work us down for 2 meters and have a staircase with us so we can reach the bottom of the sea ice. But this is not as today.
Uddumikuddu nimahaalitseqqagu kiunukinguttami miiteriunni inoqattara ukiumut hikutta issunerpaanguaagam.
And in these years, the thickest ice that we see is beneath under 1 meters.
You were saying yesterday that much of the ice now has no snow on it, and it's very hard on the dogs. Can you describe what that's like?
Atta apiharnerput addangorrama qimminu ilani hikuangami apingittuni maimi apeqqartugu upernaarman тассақиммину алоқарнангитсо қимми алуинугуортартуунга иккумут ингертаниараин.
Because of the changes also in Qaanaaq, there's no more so much snow as it used to be, and especially on the sea ice there's no snow, and the path for the dogs are damaged when we go out hunting, because the dogs used to run on snow. Now it's on the rough, cold ice. Even now, due to the changes of climate, we also see that in August, which used to be summer, that we see snow as well. And during winter time, we are lack of snow.
Mamaret, let me ask you a question. You are from Qaanaaq. That is not the only village in the far northwest of Greenland. There are others that we have read about, Marisak and others. What has happened to them?
Back then, since we were hunting, we've been all in all the small villages before, but now Moriusak is without people because of there's no ice anymore there. We used to go far south to Savissivik for hunting. We don't do that anymore.
And the young people of the Northwest, do they learn to be hunters, or are they studying other professions to go south and become helicopter pilots or mechanics or teachers?
I think because of the demands from the society is changed, but as well as there's only very few youngsters who are becoming hunters in these days. Because of the changes now, the youth are getting more educated, and that's the changes that we can see as hunters.
And again, we'd like to encourage any of you who have questions, just let us know and we'll pass them along. Can I ask, when was the first time, Jens, that you noticed that the ice, some years are colder, some years are warmer, when did you notice it was beginning, when did you begin to feel that it was a permanent change?
Addangoreartornaa malumnarreqqaau nalungikkiput alfamsikkunaalerneraan hikuinnaungitsaattarionami hermikku aqqutеqattaagut addangoreartorlutik uddumikku aqqutigaayunnaarramahu kuyammut qaanaamingaanеqanga aqqutitoqarraa pitu'yuhavik moruyuhap pitu'yuhavikkiullutungaan addakku aqqutigarreoqattalertuta aqqutigat addat ni uyahidduni aqqutitoqqat ilayatorrinnaayunnaarmata nutaani aqqutini uyahinikku qaqqat qaavihiu ingertaarayukkeqqaun hakkua ihumattuutaayunnaarangata hikukkut aqutit nuu tamakkua nuuit hikuni ajortungorangata.
I can tell that the usual path that we know from Qaanaaq to Pituffik, Moruusak area, we can't use it today anymore because of there's no more ice. Then we had to find another path, sometimes between that we need to go over top of mountain. So that's what we know today, and this occurred in the beginning of 1990.
I should clarify that, of course, there are no roads in this part of Greenland. When he talks about being able to travel to Moriasak, this is on the sea ice, on their sleds, and if there's no sea ice, you can't travel there. There's nothing for them to hunt up on the ice sheet. Nothing lives there. They only go there if they have to travel there because there is no other way.
I know now that Mamrut now goes up over the sea ice to go hunting, and for what is he hunting now, and is it difficult to travel that way?
In Tamaka to Louis Day, having our day to Louis that to in Yarak Nano Mukduni the Gami. Angada on the Radic in Yak to the Hoy, like human and Radic. Axiarin Homa Homet.
As it is today, then when we go out hunting, especially polar bear, we need to go far away. And these tracks that we used to know is no longer there because of the ice sheet is melting. And therefore the path that we used to use is no longer usable. Then we need to go up mountains to go far away, and therefore it's affected also the hunting period or hunting season for some hunters, because the hunters, they find it too difficult or too challenging sometimes to go hunting.
Should we end maybe with
There's a question back here?
Okay.
Oh, yes, of course.
I've always wondered about the winter and the dark. We often are told how dark it is, but you must have very bright moonlight. I wonder about the full moon in the winter. How can you use the full moon? How did you use the full moon decades ago? What could you do with the light of the full moon in the winter? And is that different now?
Tässä hidänä dengongnaasi u kapotdannikkaangu huminnunariut annartoqormi piniartuhu eqqoqamagaasi. Tässä ma hiptameuqaasitsiangaarkupa hinarrarlu Oktober fiaatiwani herinerput naggataartartartu taawani taima februarisiutniani kihen herinnueqqia taawa angertarpusiarput uddu unnuarlu assigimmitarto qaammanuigaangan herinersaartut qaamahutut piniarnitsinuiluaqutiddu atoqattaattu.
You have to understand that the darkness is, we see the sun last time 24th of October, and then it returns February 17th, and then the darkness is the same as daytime as night. So it's dark all the time. Of course, we use the full moon or the light of moon like we use the sun. So when moon is there, we use it in our advance.
And there's a question. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Taimaru qammadaanga miattutartuinna waikhuwa minuanneriya ikhua apraili jiwaningaani aukutseqaqqatitungaanu heqino qulitsinikaawinnarattartu nuanneq.
And of course, in order to that from the darkness, there is also a positive side. Then from the 20th April till the middle of August, we have midnight sun, and that's cool.
There's a question here.
Thank you so much. This has been really amazing to listen to. Thank you, Mel Chin, for organizing this. We are another art project located in the back there. We're the Bureau of Linguistical Reality. And what we're doing is we're finding the gaps in our language and our languages where we're at a loss of words to talk about what's happening with us. And it has come to our attention, especially since being at COP21, that we need to find new words to talk about what it is to look at predictable weather that has been predictable for millennia, that is now unpredictable. And we don't have a word for that. So we would love it if you have time to come talk with us, and we can make a word together in your language to express that with and for you, if you're interested. Do you have a word that expresses that change?
Hida addengawiartornua ma qaxautiddu assigiingitsutiu eqqarnartu assigiingitsorpakitu hiutitiu haqqummertartut malinna uihau yaunami ilaanna akerderissutitiu haqqummiunneqarattartut ilaannilu ihumaqasigiittu taakkua staimaamman amma ihumavun ila addengawiartornaanu tungatiddu assigiingigginnaawattartut eqqoriainerin qanorinnerrut uanga ihumaliortunga ammaqa nunarraarmiuqatitsinni annertuumi una nukihiuteqarnertiu allatiullu atuinermi ammaqa tassanga peqquteqaratarrinnariili kihennilaarta ilihamatuun ilaat kalaalo hosi piitarsinni haqqummiu tuarnaarramari aatta allatun iluhilimmi nalunaarutaq hilarraarmut aiqanu assiatu nuqariartuusiddu wa.
Yeah, in order to answer your question, which can be challenging, because of we of course are following the news about the changes of climate. Scientists, they come and tell us what is happening. Other scientists are saying against climate change. So it's very hard to be in the middle. But we are the ones who are seeing the changes and also live under the changes. And I once listened to a Greenlandic scientist, Jose Petersen, who had an opinion about all this, that his way of, his lecture was about following the clock.
Hiuri minna warutoni tuhangi hai na hamamata wo dumiko atukatini hida taima isiro kiato loniru unga hiuri ai kano akkosit addango yukhwana tunga humi humaga una ma no na hamme wachi hu pakishano duta atui haga kada khamahu hida miano no du.
And what I want to share with you is that I have an opinion about this, because our ancestors never experienced this rapidly changes as it is today. And I have an opinion about this. It's us people making the pollution who is the reason for the changes of the climate, I think. And also because of use, I didn't interpret it just a while, but he said something about using oil or other powering stuff that we use today is polluting our world.
There's a question over here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to ask, when the hunt will stop, if it stops, are you ready to move and migrate somewhere else? Have you been thinking about it within your communities? Is it something that you are thinking about and talking about? And is it a possibility for you to move or not? Thank you.
Hidana dangona matana akaktu chiu pinyartuno. Yo nami hania chigo waktari tukiuni kingdom kanami. Ingat dataya karom adam nukiartuan angokkaripun. Tessa audi hannom hania chigo kadok kadaradit addadu hakbat kisamro chikiuna chiu takkutartu amokdahi kangamuhani diudue amokdanor hamamata audi dutaru audi tungok dutaru kingdom adleto ayong naktumi pinyang ingat datungo kamaip.
Due to the changes of the climate, hunters was always been adapted to the situation. So that's why, as being a hunter today, you can't be a hunter full time, but you can be a hunter, and also by fishing, because of the changes of the climate as well as the warmer waters, has increased other species of fish. Especially halibut is always been there, but others are also coming. So we need also to fish more as we used to hunt. So now we also fish as a side effect from the climate changes.
Hiku harna ki ngua hama homat tai marina chiu hila tartui nangok duni. Priyangat nudi hiku nani kimukhimi pinyang nisya. Audi harna nisya umiak tokhonau na taru tamu. Tistan akong uchi puki hanno.
As it is today, our biggest challenge is when the dark comes, that the ice when ice comes used to be 2 months earlier than it is today. Because of that, the darkness is when it's dark, then we can't go out hunting. We can't go out by boat. It's the hardest period of our life when it is.
Testamenikut hikuharnikualuartuu urtuupaa aadlartilaaqannartoq qimuggertutaa aadlartiqattaqamaguut huliheqinillia ukiunikinguttarni nuuimpaa inaalernerani tissimpa aadlartitutaawa huli iluami qimuggingitsut ungahigguliarna huli ajornartoq tassikunia pilortarnera taimaalinikuur.
Before we used to already start go out far away with dog sledging in the beginning of October. Now, as it is today, in December, no one has gone far away yet because of there's no ice.
These gentlemen have to go to Charles de Gaulle to catch a plane back to Copenhagen and then on back tomorrow to Greenland. You can also see they're in their clothes, uncomfortable under the hot light. So let us thank Jens Danielsen and Mamaret Christensen and translator Tom Osterman. Before we end, we're going to have another song. Yes? Oh, Mamaret?
Jo, det her når ni kan sinne kan se når homane riut. Og jeg når i kvak.
I wish you all Merry Christmas and thank you for our staying here.
Merry Christmas to you. There's a few other people we want to thank before we hear this final song. Our sponsors at the Compton Foundation who really made all of this possible. The staff of La Générale who has helped us so much with logistics and with our first event. And of course the staff here at Gaîté lyrique, especially Eric who's been helping us out with the media. And thank you very much for those. Our friends Raphael and Claire from England who has helped us out with these posters and with flowers. Full Moon Films, this is the people associated with Mel's film, Full Moon Films, Ben Primo of the cinematographer of Smart Lab and the assistant director, Tim Sternberg, who have played such a big part in all of that. And we especially have to thank Anne Andreasen of the Children's House in Umiak, who's made, oh yeah, there's Mel. Not you. And the dogs too. Okay. And now as we wrap up, let's hear again from the performers of the Children's House in Umiak. Uminak, excuse me.
Thank you so much for letting us be here with you today. We're going to share one last song and dance with you. It's a song that's inspired from the northern part of Greenland, but also inspired from our cousins in Alaska, the Yup'ik and Inupiaq people. You will see that when they do the movements to the dance. This song is kind of like a prayer song, how we may continue to be good people and get our act together and reconnect with the earth and the unseen world and be good people.